Thank you so much, Maggie. I'm Ellie Johns-Kelley, and I am the ministry officer for the Northeast, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, up to Maine. So about 36 presbyteries, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. I have my colleague, Karl Mattison, who is our Vice President for Planned Giving with me today. Karl, would you like to tell a little about yourself?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. Karl Mattison, I'm Vice President of Planned Giving Resources at the Presbyterian Foundation, and simply thrilled to share, I guess, our learnings from the past year of working with churches and getting some insights into what went well and what could go better. Thank you.
And before we start, a couple of comments. It's probably obvious, but this is mostly tactical about lessons learned and what to do next. We are targeting a very wide breadth of church sizes and bandwidths. So we hope it is clear that there are far too many ideas we're going to present today for the average church to implement. We run through a lot of great ideas so that you can pick out the ones that are right fitted for your congregation and your abilities.
Thanks. So let's start off with naming some of the hurdles that are changing our stewardship worlds. We're going to go through four. First is COVID. A year ago, to state the obvious, a global pandemic spread around the world within a period of weeks. And to dampen the impact and figure out a solution, entire countries have shut down. So for us in the United States, that meant we've had up to, it depends on the day, up to 1 million cases of COVID. And with certainty, though, now we've surpassed 500,000 deaths. It's had a financial impact, let's just say a massive financial impact on our entire country. At first, all of the financial and labor markets were slammed. We were all together sliding uncontrollably down this slope. Yet after that, there's been this split. Higher income earners have stabilized and then actually had a real tailwind. So the stock markets, in fact, have recovered to all-time highs. Really, it's astounding. Look here at the market returns. This is for the past 2 years, which in the middle of the 2 years has been that drop from this COVID impact. As of the close of last night, the S&P 500 was up nearly 40%. And the NASDAQ was about twice that, at 79% over the past 2 years. So many of our neighbors have kept, stable employment. They've had decreased expenses, and they've sat on skyrocketing investments. So many have had great capacity to be more generous than ever. Yet at the same time, our neighbors who are lower wage workers have been hit much harder by unemployment. And generally, they don't have these investments that are skyrocketing. Workers in the bottom quartile of earnings have experienced an unemployment drop of almost 20%, while those in the top, over 60,000 a year, have had less than a 1% employment drop. So in this pie chart I put on the screen, it's a study of how Americans have used their stimulus checks, and this is from last year. The gray slice of pie represents 30% of our neighbors who have needed those checks, stimulus checks, to make ends meet and just to get by. While the blue side, that big pie slice of blue, is about 40% of our neighbors who are relatively fine. They've used the stimulus checks for savings or to pay down debt. It's been effectively a windfall. So the bottom line, what we're sharing here is that the pandemic has really magnified the wealth gap. And now that we have those struggling to get by, we also have those with more to give than ever.
And now far more pervasive is the crisis of loneliness. It has already been called out as a major issue with our current culture, yet social distancing has forced physical separation on all of us, friends, neighbors, and family. And the challenge is extreme for all, but so much more acute for some than others. And all of these factors make 2020 the most challenging for our church and our stewardship. For many of us, this has been our church right here in this space over the last year. And here is our pew, and this is our offering plate.
This absence from one another has really presented an unparalleled challenge from a stewardship and generosity perspective. So there are these inherent risks that are going to continue well beyond last year, well into this year, and perhaps extend much further. Because of our virtual nature of worship and connecting, it's here. It's here to stay. Many are not, by not worshiping together, many are not witnessing that things are happening since we are not together. Many will not be present to contribute through the offering plate, and many will remain financially uncertain, perhaps feel even quite poor from job loss and market volatility, while many are going to have much more ability than before.
In today's conversation, we are sharing what we've learned from experiences of our colleagues and our churches. So here's our agenda for today. Top 5 lessons. Lesson 1 is the umbrella topic, year-round stewardship. You may have heard us talk about it before, and we're gonna hit it home today. Under that umbrella is really a circular process of the next 4 steps. First, show what gifts have done and what they will do. Second, invite members to contribute their energy to the ministry. Third, make available the proper tools for them to give conveniently. And fourth, show thanks and appreciation for them for their generosity. And then we start all over.
Thank you. So most churches, whom some of my colleagues and I have surveyed, state that a digital presence is going to continue to play some role in their ministries going forward. About 70% anticipate some balance of in-person and digital ministries, whether that's worship or other ways of connecting. And especially for them, this 70%, the year-round stewardship campaign may be a critical piece for maintaining all of these connections and touches. And here's why. We as the church have always had this natural, organic engagement cycle built in. We've been so fortunate because our togetherness is so integral. You know, our weekly worship together and our meetings and planning and study together have all actually served, albeit accidentally at times, it serves still as this brilliant cycle of stewardship, of witness to the good things that we see, of then giving to those good things, and then of appreciation for doing those great things. So once we rip out that togetherness, we fracture and we disconnect all of these previously organically working parts. So now with this physical distance, we're a little bit like those in the nonprofit, I hate to say fundraising, but the nonprofit fundraising world, where we too are removed often from those who are making this mission possible. We have to be intentional like they are to show, to invite. We have to be intentional to make doorways to give, be intentional to thank, because those points of engagement are not otherwise happening. And so let's get into each one of these.
And it starts with show. Show what past gifts have done and show what future gifts will do. This practice really needs to stick around. Let's demonstrate how amazing our generous givers have had impact through gifts to this ministry. what a great idea their gift was and how wonderful their next gift will be. Let's talk about 4 ways to show what impacts gifts have had.
So let's kick it off now with the narrative budget. We'll dive right into this priority tool. You see that green stripe at the top. That means this is a great idea. The narrative budget, it's an outstanding tool to tell the story of your year. Many of us are going to be a little bit surprised that a budget is a great storytelling tool for the congregation. You see an Excel spreadsheet in your head when you think a line item budget. And how inspirational is that? Well, the story is told by a narrative budget, not exactly a line item budget. And we'll get into the difference right here. According to the line item budget, it's over here on the left, those facts and figures. We can totally agree with this oversimplified line item budget that there in this budget are 7 people, 1 dog, and 1 car. Maybe some other assets are happening, but this is a pretty accurate and even responsible account of an event that we're going to show over on the right in the narrative budget. Same details, they're all there. You see the people, you see the dog, car, but here you know the names. You can sense perhaps some smells. There's some joy, and you can even imagine maybe where they're going. There's a lot of hints to that. You can see they've probably been on this trip before, if not every year. You also know that each one of them will do what they can do to go again next year. And they'll plan out perhaps how their children and their children's children can be a part of this too. So we need that narrative budget in stewardship so that we feel what happened. This shows love, it shows loss, and it shows we've been doing this for many years, and it shows how we plan to do this again next year and how we plan to pass this on.
Do you need something simpler? We have a way you can create a pamphlet to share with the congregation to show how the gifts were used and what impact occurred because of it. There are lots of great examples out there. If this is new to you, you have a ministry relations officer at the Presbyterian Foundation, a person like me who's delighted to speak with you, and a resource that can provide online. We have a resource that we can provide to you that's online that can help you produce a narrative budget or see some very basic examples. Here's one from Clinton Presbyterian Church in New Jersey. What I love about the one they created this year is it talked about how they worshiped in a new way, how they cared from a distance, and they loved with abundance. Now, one thing they do is they segment out their building cost. I don't recommend that. Divide those out into your areas of ministry, because really the building's only there for the sake of mission and ministry. And that's really the story we want to tell. But no, there are great examples out there that can really help you as you craft your own.
That's really nice. So next in showing, let's tell about impact and how things are different while we're making impact. And you can say it face to face. Maybe still on video this year, depends on where you are. But especially continuing this year, because without being together in person, members are not witnessing all that is happening. And the church might feel to many people still like it's closed. But members need to hear what they cannot see, that ministry is still happening and that it's just happening in new ways. They need to hear that this past year has not been a year of rest. I'm going to say that one more time. I think a lot of pastors will probably not, I hope. This past year has not been a year of rest. We've been doing amazing things, but we've had to totally reinvent how to do them in a totally different way. And all of this innovation and this adapting and this continuation of ministry in this face of adversity is possible because of your and my generosity. So we need to celebrate that impact, explain why it's harder to feel it this year, and we need to brag a little bit. So right here, you can see that this is me. It's a minute for mission. where I'm sharing the contradiction of the emptiness of the church versus all the work that is actually happening just in kind of in the virtual world, like in places where we're not all seeing it all the time. It's a video that I'd say it's fairly put together, but our brilliant director of music can do these videos like no one else, putting music to it and everything. So if you find this effective, it's more in the hands of the artist than it is the speaker, but I just want to give someone else credit where it's due. But like many of you, we're also doing some great mission videos to demonstrate that impact is happening.
And don't assume anyone knows what's going on, ever. Your congregation is doing so many things that are subtle and under the radar. And we don't have a marketing department to seek, find, and celebrate these things. Think about how to connect members with the impact that we cannot see and quantify what is happening. Make us feel the peace that someone felt that happened because of us. Show us the hug made possible, the hunger that we help solve, the faith that we help grow.
And do it constantly. Remind people constantly that they are the why in frequent and short blurbs and articles, because that's what most of us have the bandwidth for, is short. Remind them constantly that they're the why through the bulletin, newsletter articles, minutes for mission, offering talks, wherever it is that your church shares the information.
Now that we are showing that this ministry is an outstanding place for members to do ministry, it is the perfect time to invite them. They are uplifted. Feeling giving is an opportunity, not an obligation. It's truly the moment to invite them to take action. Here are 4 places we can place an invitation, going from simple and fast to more invested and intentional.
The simplest, easiest invitations are these one-liners. You can drop these in everywhere that you've just shown impact. It's the next step that the reader expects. Without it, we as a reader might assume that the mission that was just stated has been accomplished and nothing else is needed. So we could drop this in every time. You can see it in red font here. Every time we say that we did this great thing, whatever that may be. We fed 50 people. We had 50 attend virtual worship. We served this community, or we solved this problem. Punctuate the sentence with, it was because of you. And it can be again. So when we message this, it usually reads best when it's an uplifting call to action, kind of an obvious next step, like this depends on you and me, or to make more of this happen, please join us, or you can make the difference here, click here to consider your gift. And for when we return to worship in person, we can extend the same kind of invitation during the worship service, and having a constant physical presence for this invitation. This is just an example. There's a million different cool ways to do this, but the concept of an offering box or like these cards might be really helpful this year, because most churches that we've talked to, surveyed, are seeking alternatives to passing the offering plate, at least on a temporary basis.
And since most are still not worshiping in person still, and even after the Great Return, a significant majority that we surveyed expect to continue an online worship presence. So for those, this keyboard continues to be today's offering plate. In online worship, the offertory is of the utmost importance. Use this time to share an offering talk or video. Repeat this cycle. Show what gifts have done. Invite viewers to join in giving to power this ministry. Thank them for their generosity. It's because of them that this is possible, and pray over the offering. To step it up, make it simple to make a gift. This is just about making a door for them to open, and it is not complex rocket science. It's basically providing the doorways that visitors expect to make a gift. Here are ultra simple solutions. 1, Give should always be at the top menu of your website. As web users, we have been conditioned to expect that. 2, State that the online offering is available for those who usually use the offering plate. 3, Provide a QR code. You can get one in 30 seconds and it's free. And yes, QR codes have made a comeback. I was told 2 years ago that I was antiquated because I talked about them, but believe me, they really have made a comeback. People use them. And placing a QR code here enables your users or your viewers to use a mobile device or some other second device to scan and make a gift instead of clicking on a hyperlink that's going to take them out of the worship service where they make their gift and then they struggle to get back into worship. We don't want that to happen. 4, it is still worth putting the expected give now button or text to give invitation down here because it's what your visitors expect.
Right. So that give now link is going to bring your viewer somewhere. It needs to go somewhere. So it will go to either directly to a giving portal, or very often, this is very helpful, to a general giving opportunity page. And we put one up here just as a reference. It's an example. Notice that that donate online button is at the top. The visitor expects that. If they leave your service to give now, that's the first thing that they want to see. And when you click on that, then they'll be whisked away to your online giving provider. It's quick and simple. But there's more on this page. You can highlight more common ways to give and select those by according to whatever your membership most likely wants to see or is accustomed, so that they don't have to go further to look. The bottom line here is to just choose a layout that prioritizes the most frequently needed items in the highest priority space. So most of us should still give cash and checks top billing because we don't ever want to remove or demote your check writers. They're often incredibly significant givers in our congregations. So recurring gifts and online banking are also very common ones that many of us might want to prioritize on our page. We'll just check out a couple of other options. You should consider having pledging, especially during pledging times of year, of course, and planned giving. It might not get top billing, especially during pledge season. You have to make decisions on what gets pushed further down. But having these things visible, everyone needs to see it whenever their eyes pass over this page. Recurring visibility is subtle but incredibly helpful. Lastly, make this page so easy and fast to read. This page should serve as a tool, not as stewardship education. A long text, for example, that has its place. It's just not here on a tool or a transactional page. So whenever possible, just use some big icons, big buttons, and large text for tiles. Make this easy on your membership.
Sermons. If you do only one thing for stewardship, we ask that you preach on it. What you say as a preacher influences us in the pews immensely, or in our lounge chairs. When the topic of money goes unsaid, it goes unheard. Also, if you only preach on stewardship once a year, people will have dollar signs in their minds. Preach on stewardship at least monthly. Simply weave it into your message so people hear that it is about mission and ministry. Without it, the congregation is flying solo in how to view money in their lives, and it's an area where the right thing doesn't normally come naturally. If you're uncomfortable talking about money, you're not alone. No one is comfortable if we perceive ourselves as begging or asking for our own salaries. If you get this, this is a great read. A Spirituality of Fundraising by Henri Nouwen. It's under $10 and it's a fast read too.
After inviting, we absolutely must give the reader the next place to step in order to take their action. Plate revenue has turned off for most of us, right? So we need to create more doorways for giving. This is where it gets real. Prior to COVID, a study, according to the National Study of Congregations' Economic Practices, indicated that 78% of gifts are given during a worship service. Imagine having no worship service means closing the door to 78% of revenue for the foreseeable future, leaving that 78% to find another doorway.
Already, cashless transactions have been outpacing cash and checks rapidly. In this graph, notice how the trends in payments for debit and credit cards are the real movers for the last 20 years. Certainly, keep offering to receive checks, but open the doors to card transactions. Without the offering plate, this past year has only served to supercharge the use of electronic transactions. In this chart, you can see that the churches using our own online giving platform at the foundation have quadrupled in giving volume just from the previous year. The process of having online giving is actually quite simple. In fact, at the Presbyterian Foundation, we have partnered with Vanco, one of the leaders in online giving for churches, to provide this for our own congregations. And it's less expensive to come through us than through Vanco directly. It's a great program to give on your own computer.
And it's easily accessible on a mobile phone, which is today imperative. Now, remember how we just talked about that QR code a little while ago, about that Give Now button and about the giving URL address? Let's restate this clearly what these really are. These are doorways. Think of these each as a way that we can put something everywhere for someone to enter when they're feeling generous. So every time we showed that impact and made that invitation we were just talking about, and that reader got excited to do something for the first time or to do something more, we made that invitation to come in to more generosity. And then now we say, and here we'll open the door with you. So they just tap on this, and then they are doing the next generous thing. Otherwise, the doorway is somewhere else. It's at their computer. The doorway might be at their checkbook or at the offering plate. And these are all fine and good. They're great doorways, but these are rarely in hand at that moment of inspiration and at that moment of invitation. So without that doorway in hand, each of us has to remember that inspiration to be generous that we just felt. We have to remember that later in the day or later in the week when we come to those more traditional doorways. And sure, many of us do remember. We'll still make that gift. But you get the concept though, right? It's that many people don't remember or get distracted. And we're just talking here about eliminating that distance between the invitation and the making of the gift. So we can't ignore this final topic in this section. Online giving has certainly been the lead topic for the past year. But if you have the bandwidth, if you really nailed online giving, do let your members and visitors know about other important ways that they can give to fund your ministries. Appreciated securities, IRA distributions or qualified charitable IRA distributions, and donor advised funds are all extremely important and very common, very relevant tools that are being used by people in your congregation right now. But they often don't think to give them to the church. They don't know that you take them, or if you have the capacity to take them. Yes, you do. Just let them know that your church is delighted to accept any of these types of gifts. And side note, if it's complicated for you, again, we're going to show you your ministry relations officer who can help you with that answer.
Let's tie this all together with the final step of the cycle, gratitude for generosity. It's so important because most are not there in person to witness on a recurring basis what is happening in our church. When we are together, we are immersed in these wonderful things, and we get the affirmation that the part we played making all these ministries work was really important. And we kind of generate that self-thank you on our own. But in this lower level of engagement, that self-appreciation is not happening. So far as lessons learned goes, this is the big one. We all pretty much know we should be appreciating much more intentionally. Thanking is intentional and deserves a system.
So yeah, we'll need to pick out and assign some of us in the congregation the responsibility for thanking. Let's call it a thanking team and a system. So that way we know that it happens reliably, because trying really hard without a system in place doesn't really pan out. But this thank you system doesn't need to be hard. It's able to be quite simple. And you'll probably want to start out or go to whatever the next level is from where you are with something manageable, simpler steps. But for now, we're just going to breeze through some great examples of like these trigger events in the discipline of thanking. We're going to break it down into 3 times when we can thank: annually, quarterly, and on a rolling basis.
Annual gratitude might be in a year-end letter. A couple ways you could go with is first, thanking for past year giving and thanking for the coming year's pledge or estimate of giving. Toward the end of the year, it's the culmination of the generosity season and the pledge season. So we have a great deal to work with here. It might also be a thank you for pledging for the coming year. But the biggest thank you I want you to take away, if you do nothing else, is with your quarterly or semi-annual letter. That quarterly statement of giving is already a reliable system for most of our churches. So don't just add a thank you here. That won't cover you. Write a letter and include it with the statement. You'll see here a sample letter from First Presbyterian Church of Brooklyn, and you can reach out to your MRO to get a copy of this. What I love is that they tell the story of what has happened over the last quarter and how your gift made a difference. Then they say, enclosed is your statement. Please look it over, check it for accuracy. If you've not, if you're off in your giving, just in terms of timing, and can make additional gifts, we appreciate that. If your situation has changed, simply let us know. We understand if you need to change your estimate of giving. And if you are living in a season of fruitfulness, I love that term. Those who got the stimulus checks who didn't need it, we're living in a season of fruitfulness. They could do a lot more for mission and ministry with that. Golly, the church is always thrilled to welcome those additional gifts. But I love how it's permission giving. It tells the story and it helps people see that this isn't just about a financial transaction. It is really about engaging in mission and in ministry.
Thanks, Ellie. I'm going to go off-road for a second and really endorse what you said. I think the most powerful letters I've seen, whether they're annual letters or quarterly letters, have said if you're in your season of fruitfulness, this is a time where we can step forward. If you're not, we want to care for you. And it's that permission to boldly step in whichever direction you need to, because this is about us as a faith family and doing great things, and we care deeply regardless. And we want you to be playing that role that you need to play and the role we as a church need to play for you. Those are powerful messages. People are really appreciative of those. I've heard some great feedback. Thanking on a rolling basis. Here's some ideas for appreciating all the time. When it comes to thanking throughout the year on a rolling basis, there are unlimited great ideas out there, but we're just going to list some common ones so that you can keep the cadence of gratitude rolling. And so you can kind of pull from other churches some ideas, because these are probably the most common things you'll see. So thank every week in worship. This is so simple to place a thank you. Just drop it in there every single week at the start of the offering. Many times you might offer something more extensive, like an offering talk, where there's a thank you that's followed up by an impact story, or reflections from someone on the committee about scripture, or some impact, a personal story. Consider every week in the bulletin or newsletter. This here is quick, and it's simple to drop a thank you for the gifts you're sharing with this congregation to do God's work here. It can be like just this recurring, very simple. It doesn't have to be a sophisticated message. It's a thank you. Simple, short. One more place where you can envelop your congregation in this culture of appreciation, because that culture of appreciation, after a while, starts to get felt. It has an impact, and it becomes a part of you. And then every week or month, this is going to be a little bit more targeted personal notes of gratitude. It's uplifting, although it is more work. You can here engage that thank you team. They need to be ready to write a quick thank you note. If you spread it among a team, it's very easy to do. If you have one person or a pastor responsible for all of it, it's a bit overwhelming. Most of your thank you team will usually not know or have access to the dollar amounts about which they're writing. They're not going to know what people are giving on a thank you team, and most of them, but still they can express gratitude for that gift nevertheless. Here are two great ways that this can work. The first is sending a handwritten note to everyone in the congregation during the year. Divide it up throughout the year. The session might be the thanking team and a pastor. You might divide these up at the beginning of each session meeting to make it easy. Churches say it's a really brief amount of time, but it's rewarding, and then they definitely get out. The second is to send notes that are triggered by unexpected gifts. This one's a very important one, because any major gift or any out of the ordinary contribution should trigger a special note from this thank you team. You can decide as a group what would trigger, what is the amount or the event that would trigger a thank you note. Gifts, for example, over a specific amount of money, a first-time giver, that's a great one. And then set up the process so that that note happens. Someone's informed and someone does it. And this has a spectacular impact. I promise you, it's unexpected from churches, even though we all nod our heads, it should be happening. And people talk about this. They remember, and they are grateful for that. So recommendation, we should probably all, even if we're not on a thank you team, take a moment after the call, after this webinar, and get your note cards and just have them in your desk, because this is one of the greatest things we can do. So here it is, full circle. We've just gone through a whole lot out there of 5 lessons learned from the pandemic and all these little sub lessons. So we don't want to leave you overwhelmed. So as we wind down our time together, Ellie and I want to share with you some resources so you're not on your own for figuring out what step is first and how can we get these kinds of resources. So we're going to just trot through 3.
They're all recorded.
Yeah.
And we will get a link
resources.
to the recordings.
Oh, then let's
In a
watch
week.
it another time.
They're all recorded. So the best resources we're going to recommend are these. First is your ministry relations officer. Second is a virtual campaign resource, and then there's your online giving tool.
And your ministry relations officer we name first. This is your team. This is us. And each church on this call has your very own stewardship professional that you can call up, also known as your MRO, for Ministry Relations Officer. And we are your resource for all that we've shared today and more. You can search at www.presbyterianfoundation.org. And at the bottom of the page is where you'll find the spot that invites you to look up your MRO by zip code.
Thank you, Ellie. Yeah, we have that link in the chat. I'll put that link in again so that everyone can get that if they have more questions, tactical questions, or looking for consulting resources. So absolutely, we will make that available so that everyone can find that. I think that you have just a little bit more here. I want to let you guys finish, and then we'll jump into the Q&A.
You bet. We just got a few more slides. We want to share about the virtual campaign resource at stewardshipnavigator.com. Even when you do a year-round stewardship effort, the pledge campaign is likely to remain a big part of it. And it's usually during the fall season. But you've got that resource here at stewardshipnavigator.com that can help you with that stewardship campaign. I'll give you a couple of examples of screenshots in just a second. Your pledge campaign might look a little bit like this. We've listed here some of the resources that you would actually see duplicated in the Stewardship Navigator program. And here's where you get it. When you go to that website, there's a login page for you to zero in on all of these resources. You can sign up here if you haven't done it before, or just log in at the top right. And before going further, I want to note that this service to your congregation is at no cost to the church. So this is just something you sign up for and get. It's pretty fantastic that way. When else do you get something free? So to find a virtual campaign, you click on annual campaign. This is your resource page. It's the top of the left menu, as you see here. When you click on that, it will give you a bunch of campaigns to select from. But this online or virtual campaign is at the bottom left. And when you select that as your preferred campaign, the next time you open this up, it'll go right to this online campaign. And you'll see at the workspace on the bottom, pre-campaign work, week 8, week 7, kind of going in reverse. Each of these weeks, when you click on it, provides ideas and resources to get started on those ideas. You can grab these and adapt them to suit your needs. And if you look there on the left corner at the bottom, when you're stuck or you need some advice, or Olanda, I am really sorry. How did Olanda is my MRO, so I took this screenshot. He's fantastic. But you can reach out because his contact information or your MRO's contact information is automatically placed there at the bottom. So when you're on one of these pages and you're stuck, you click over there and see if you can reserve some time to get your MRO's great advice, because they'll also help right-size the ideas to your congregation, because not all congregations are going to have the same bandwidth, and they're very remarkably attentive to that.
And here's that online giving program that's available to your congregation. If you're not already offering it, check it out. The application is very easy. It is a 2-page application that you submit with a voided check for your church's bank account, so the money can be direct deposited either at the end of the month, or if your administrators know that your church is a offering plate to offering plate church during the pandemic, you can have that distribution automated for weekly. But your church does not have to have a website to use the service, which is really amazing. Say you only have a Facebook page, then you have your donation link that you can put on the About section. You can make it as a post that you pin to the top of your page. And it really is an easy program to use. And we provide the back-end administration. We actually receive and receipt the gifts for your congregation's behalf. The gift shows up on their bank statement or their credit card statement as a gift to your church, but that receipt comes from us as an immediate e-receipt. And then we also provide a year-end summary that gets emailed out the last week of January to every donor. So it's really handy, and it's simply a 2% transaction charge. There's no startup fee, there's no recurring fee. It's just the 2% transaction charge off the gift. And say your church does some fee for service things, there's also, you can add a special fund that's fee for service that would generate a sales receipt rather than a giving receipt. And then that sales transaction doesn't show up in the year-end summary. So we're really glad to be able to offer this service to you. If you're not making online giving available to your folks yet, reach out to your ministry relations officer and we'll help get you set up. We are so very thankful for the time you have shared with us today, for the passion you have for your congregation, for the mission and ministry that they're about. And as Stephen said, your mission is our mission. So we're here to support you. Please call upon us. Know you have a great team who's thrilled to be of resource to you, and there's no cost. This is our service to the church. So we're glad to serve you. Let's move to questions and answers.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Karl. I love that you thanked us. We're going to thank you. I encourage everybody to find a reaction that you want to use and just show some appreciation to Ellie and Karl for all that great information.
Thanks for that.
We have a few minutes and we have had quite a few questions that have come through. So let me share some of these with the two of you. And we'll start, a little bit broad and then maybe get into some of the tactics. One of the questions that we had that I saw repeated a few times was, how do you overcome or help people who don't want to participate online actually come to church online? How do you help them move into that space? I think that a lot of people are experiencing this where they've got people who say, well, I'll wait until we come back in person, or I don't want to do it online, but they're doing other things online. So how do we help them engage like that?
You want to take it or you want me?
Oh, I think we both probably have some insights. This is a really difficult question because it's what's someone's motivation, and there should be clearly a spiritual motivation to get in there and get a faith tune up, because I can't get by. I just love that part of it. I'm dependent upon it, but it's hard to convince someone of that. The connection, I think, that has been most exciting to me and that I will miss dearly when we're back in person at my congregation, I think might be my best answer, is that we have tried to keep connection at my home church by having these interviews with congregation members, since we cannot meet together and see one another. Our congregation has gone to ask people to share about their faith, a little bit about themselves, and we have these connections that we are missing otherwise in a virtual world. And I have met people in our congregation, in our worship service, that have on a regular basis brought me to just an emotional connection with them, and I've never spoken with them in the congregation before. That to me has been a game changer, and that's why I don't want to miss our worship service online, because in many ways I'm terrified of what we'll miss now when we go back, because we won't have this knowledge of people we're afraid to otherwise engage with. I don't know if that's a great answer. I don't think there's the perfect answer to this, but that's just my my personal experience and insight. Ellie?
And I would say too, you might not convince them to join you online, but remember, the key is to keep telling the story of the mission and ministry you're participating in. So e-newsletters, if you still have an old-fashioned paper newsletter, make sure you're putting those kind of stories in there. You're going to want to use the QR code for the paper newsletter and the giving link on the e-newsletter, right? But think about all the stories you can tell, include them in, and don't give up in inviting them to worship with you or check it out, or find out what's behind that. Simply have a conversation with them. Maybe they have hate electronics. Maybe they have a theological conundrum about it, but have a conversation to learn what it's about. I think that's the most pastoral thing you can do.
Well, thank you for that, because what I heard in that was, what we heard a little bit in the first session, which was make sure you're making connections with people, but also just invite again into action. I want to ask a question though, that's the flip side of that I think a lot of churches have also seen during this pandemic time, and that is people coming to online worship who would never darken the door of the physical church, and that we're really afraid that we're going to lose if we come back in person, right? So this begs the question of, how do we do hybrid church that feels overwhelming? And how do we invite those folks who have been coming to us virtually, who maybe are never going to come to that physical church in person? How do we invite them to be a part of our ministry from wherever they are?
Well, and I think it comes to still offering hybrid worship. And if this pandemic has taught us nothing else, we can do it, we can figure it out, and we're not doing it alone. There's a Zoom, a Facebook group that you can turn to. There are lots of other groups connecting via social media to find out best practices. How do you make it work? And I think a lot of this is a work in progress. I think we're learning new things, but we're also discovering that it's possible to implement these pieces. Again, it goes back to the invite people to come, to get to know you, but there are some who won't be able to. I think a richness of the pandemic is we've been discovering some of our own shut-ins are worshiping with us for the first time in years. Another reason why hybrid worship is important, even when we return. So it's continuing the invites and again, listening for where people are and helping to meet them where they are so that they can engage in mission, ministry, and spiritual formation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Karl, did you want on that?
I would certainly echo that. I don't want to take time answering the question with an I don't know. But I think that's such an important question. And humbly speaking, I don't know. But the part that needs to follow I don't know to such an important question is we need to get there. And I think that part of the value we have at the Presbyterian Foundation is these connections we have with hundreds of churches that are actually online right now, because we can bring these great ideas back, because we're learning this right now. The answer is all personal right now, but we're going to start learning from other churches who say, 70% of the churches we did these surveys with, and we are going to still have some kind of virtual presence for our ministries. And how is that going to happen? That's some things we can speculate on right now, but there's more specifics where we can bring in experience from other churches who say, we're doing it this way, so that we can be that. I mean, in a way, we often function as this hub of great ideas from all of these people who've shown up to this webinar. I think they're where we're going to get some of these what's next answers. And I'm kind of excited that was asked.
Yeah, and I like that we have to sort of learn this as we go in a lot of ways. And again, I would just encourage people to continue to focus on that invitation. One of the things I'm sharing with churches is ask people where they are, what they're doing that aligns to the mission and the ministry of the physical church that they're worshiping with. I wanted to ask, because we saw in the chat, and if you do have a question, I see there's a couple hand raises. If you have a question, please put that in the chat, because we're trying to curate questions so we can get as many answered as possible. One of the challenges I think that people are having is, how do you do the offering online, right? When you do the offering in person, there's a quiet moment, there's maybe music, there's an engagement that's happening physically. I know a lot of churches are struggling with this. They kind of stick it as an ask at the end, or they don't want to do it in the middle because they don't want people to leave. How do we do that in a spiritually authentic way? And where's the best place to put that in our online worships?
Theologically, I love to have it following the sermon because it's a response to hearing the word proclaimed. There are others who want it earlier in the worship because they want the final thought to be the sermon and the benediction. And it comes down to where you are theologically and what you want to do. I think what is key, though, is sharing stories. Going back to the slide we shared where we talked about the different way to do the offering. And you can have little videos that people can make just off their smartphone talking about the why of this church. Why do they love this church? Why do they support it? It's also a great opportunity if you support a mission coworker to ask them to do a recording that you can add in to the service. You know, our churches are doing worship differently. Some it's Facebook Live, some it's pre-recorded and posted on YouTube. So it's figuring out the means that's going to work best for your church. I love, Karl, I want to toss it to you because you have great examples of what your own congregation does.
Well, what I'd love to share is what I've seen when I was doing some research up in the Northwest with a MRO colleague of ours, Rob Hagan. We were looking at what churches did, especially early on. How do they do the offering? And Rob Hagan was adamant that you maintain all of this. One thing, I think the most common thing he mentions, you got to do the prayer over the offering. And you back up, you've got to do something impactful. You have to keep that space in your worship service so that it has the space and somehow have this representation of our own sacrifice. It's the kind of thing that we lose from not having the plate. Even that is kind of distance from actually doing the work of the church, which you don't feel when you're not witnessing it. I mean, sending money by a credit card is the way we have to do it, but we're really disconnected from the fact that we have made a change. We have done something and had an impact because of that. And so that offertory is a great time to do it. Churches are doing things like an offering talk. They're doing things like doing a thank you and a welcome, having music, and then having a prayer next to the video. Ensuring that that space is guarded and you still have that tradition of what we expect, and add a little bit more of the thank you and impact stories, I think is remarkably helpful, because like the less we see or hear about the offering or about our giving, the less connected we are with it.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that's interesting that I saw in the chat and a number of the questions was that tension between trying to do things the way we did them and just recreate that online, or acknowledging that it's totally different and leaning into that difference and going ahead and just saying, well, we're going to have to do it differently. And so I hear that in your answers of what can we maintain, but how do we adapt that to the reality of the space that we're in right now? What do you think about that? I'm just curious. Ellie, you know, you've pastored churches not in a pandemic. Karl, you work with a lot of churches. I know Ellie, you work with a lot of churches now too. What are you seeing in terms of having pastors or having congregation members name the reality of how different it is and how different it feels, versus just trying to keep things familiar?
Well, Fred Rogers used to always say, what is mentionable is manageable. And I think that's what it comes down to. Naming what we're living into and how we're trying to figure it out, the new ways we're engaging in mission and ministry. Again, no one is perfect. It is only God who is perfect. And so we figure this out together. It's part of living in community, and trying to put our best foot forward as we figure out life together in this peculiar situation.
Thank you.
I'll just say that first is these chat messages coming up are all spectacular. And I feel like we should just all be honoring them because these great responses are coming through and it's a little bit blowing my mind. It's fantastic, all of the ideas, and that kind of reinforces what I just said a little while ago, is that we learn these great ideas from what's happening and real feedback from what's working. It's just exciting to keep reading that. But I would say one of the most exciting things a while ago when we were trying to introduce churches into online giving many years ago, and how do we get churches to come into accepting that? Because there was a real, let's just say, hesitance. And now it seems obvious we need it. But do we lead or follow? I think we followed on that trend and all of a sudden spiked up because of necessity. What was really helpful, though, for changing people's minds was looking at the history of giving in the church. And I know there's some great writing by James Hudnut-Bulmer. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I've just read his stuff. But it's great to read how we used to support the work of our church. And it used to be government funded, and it was pew rentals and things like that. And to break what we think has always been the way it's been done is not hard once you look at how it's always been done. It hasn't always been done uniformly. We've had to go into new ways of doing things. And I think we're going to go, whether we're pushed or pulled. We're already moving there. You saw the slide Ellie shared where the use of cards is skyrocketing. The use of cash and checks is not as frequent now. And that trend is not going away. So we just have to be used to the Almighty Dollar by James Hudnut-Bulmer. Thank you. That's a great one. Sorry, the chat room was brilliant. I think that's something we all need to just be prepared to adapt to. The biggest challenge I think we need to face is how do we model giving to the next generation with it being all virtual? Because without showing like our heirs, our loved ones, like, hey, this is what we do with our church, with our community. It's because of us that this is happening. It doesn't get talked about if we don't show it. That's, I think, the bigger crisis than adapting, because adapting is going to happen.
Yeah, thank you for that. I when I work with churches, I remind them that how we do things might be how we're comfortable doing things and have been for 30, 40, 50 years. But the church today looks very different than the church when Jesus was with us 2,000 years ago. And we've come a long way, and we've got a long way to go, but we have to be constantly ready to move to how can we serve in the place with the resources that we have right now. In the next few minutes, I want to ask a few tactical questions. And yes, there have been some questions about, can we save the chat? You can save the chat yourself, or we are going to, when we package everything up, do what we can to make sure that we have the chat available from the recording and make all of these resources, or as many resources available as we can. And though I know we all sound like broken records, please reach out to your MRO because they can answer a lot of these questions or put you in touch with the right resources. One of the questions that came early, and I think that this is so important, actually to explain some of the basics that many of us who work in the space of money and finance take for granted. How does the NASDAQ actually work, and does it have an impact on regular people? Or when you pay attention to the stock market, is just a thing for rich people? Short answer I know is no, but I'm going to throw this to Karl and Ellie and let the two of you say, how does this actually have an impact on regular people who are not, wealthy stockholders?
Wow. Ellie?
I'm tossing this one to you, friend.
Well, I'm a little bit of I do follow the markets a little bit. That's a really interesting question. There's so many ways I can go with this. And I guarantee you I'm going to get obsessed with this chat room and how good the answers are there. I'll say
More the chat room, just talk.
the markets are spectacular indicators of how we are doing as a financial, I don't want to say powerhouse, but like how our country's health is doing. What's interesting is that the NASDAQ is really about, is a different indicator than S&P 500, Dow Jones, but they're all kind of going up at the same time, just at different amounts. NASDAQ is going out of control, doing so well, and will probably pull back soon. Long story short, it matters to all of us because when the markets are going up, even if we don't have our own personal investments, everyone who is invested is doing well right now. And they have businesses. Those businesses are doing well. Our retirement accounts are doing well. And so if we don't have investments, the places where we get, who are generating income and revenue and charitable gifts, all those things are going well. So everyone does have some benefit, as you know, many of the big boats are rising, but those who don't have those investments are still to some degree benefiting. Because even people who are not making ends meet, and you saw needed those stimulus checks desperately, those stimulus checks are possible because this country is making money. They're not benefiting as much. We can get into a whole lot of ethical issues, but the fact that the markets are doing well means that people who have those investments are doing well. Retirement accounts are being funded, and they're able to pump in more money so that there's something to this. When the market goes down, that all kind of dries up. Mm-hmm. We can't pay our taxes. Stimulus checks are even harder to cut, even though we'll just incur more debt to cut them. But we have to pay for them somewhere.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Karl. The answer to the question is it's complicated, and how the markets integrate with each other and how they impact the economy is complicated. I love having these conversations, and I think that a lot of us do. So so reach out, ask. We'll talk more about that. But that was a great short answer. I want to ask another tactical question before we start to break for this session. Practically, how do you show building costs as a part of a narrative budget?
I'm glad to take it.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great. I love your answer.
I would not show it in your narrative budget. It doesn't tell the story of how the building is being used. You want to take your building costs.
Ask you to pause for 1 second, because I think I may have asked that question wrong. How do you show the building costs as a part of your ministry and then the ministry activity in a narrative budget?
So I think you just talk about the different things that are happening in your building: worship, outreach. Do you have AA, NA groups? How else is your building being used? Are you housing a food pantry or providing meals, a dinner? How's it being used for pastoral care and Christian education? You're going to weave stories into those different segments about what's happening in mission and ministry. And if you just put building costs to the side, people don't see that that's really about mission and ministry, and often they get anxious about how much it costs for a building. It doesn't unpack the story, so you do that in your narratives. And then to divide it out, it's a bit of a guesstimate, but you can look at, how many hours in a given week is our building used for worship or worship preparation? How many hours a week for mission and outreach? How many hours a week for Christian education? So it's a bit of a guesstimate, but you create your percentages based off that, and then apply it to your overall line items for building and maintenance. So from capital upkeep to the gas and electricity to snow removal or insurance, all of those pieces above get divided into the various sectors.
Thank you for that. Another practical question for the two of you. Do you have a good resource or a good suggestion for a way to capture time and talent giving online?
Ellie?
So Vanco is coming out with some new resources that I believe will be accessible to anyone, whether you use Vanco or not. And I have other MROs on the call that I wonder if they can jump in. But keep your eyes peeled. They have some new resources available right now, and that's a special Vanco app that you can download. And unfortunately, I have it on my other phone, so I can't tell you what it is, but we can share that with you in our follow-up. But they also have a brand new system coming out that's going to help you connect from everything from people putting in reservations to, I believe you'll be able to collect information on time and talents. And then the good old fashioned way is, you know, create a card that people can fill out or use a Google form that people can fill out. They fill it in and then it will drop into an Excel spreadsheet and you can do it that way. I think that's probably the easiest, using something like a Google form. And you can post it on your website and ask people to fill it out to share their pledge of time and talent.
Yeah, I would just add to that, one of the things I suggest, Google Survey is a good way to do that as well, because then you get some nice pie charts and you don't have to convert them yourself. I don't like to have to do that math change and create pie charts that way, so I can do it that way. I would also, I would just offer the suggestion, this is a lovely way to invite people to tell their stories. And so the invitation to tell your story and to tell us what you're doing is always a good way to do that. Let's see, just another couple questions I want to make sure that we address. And this is sort of the question that always gets asked. We're talking a lot about online giving. We're talking a lot about, in particular, online giving of financial resources. How do we encourage people to give online without feeling like we're constantly asking for money?
I challenge people to give at a personally meaningful level with their time, their talent, and their resource. And you have to figure out what is personally meaningful for you with all three. But we do know that when we're engaging all three legs of the stool, and you know, I'll use my thumb, it's a lot shorter. It might not be an even distribution, but that stool still stands. But you take away time or talent or resource and your three-legged stool falls over. So really challenging your people to engage all three at a personally meaningful level, not out of a sense of obligation, because if it's obligation, they're going to give the least amount. We want to invite them to give because they really believe in what we're doing. They value this community of faith and they want to see that the gospel is shared in wonderful ways, not just for themselves or our small group that gathers with us, but for all to be able to engage.
I would just really echo what we talked about in this presentation and boil it down to those different steps. You know, show that what we're doing as ministry is having a real impact because of you. Invite if you'd like to do more, and make sure that after thanking it, it keeps going around as a cycle, because it's a lot easier to say this is something great that you can do than it is to say, can you give us money? It's just a lot harder. And if anyone has just a long lunch break, I would highly recommend the book, A Spirituality of Fundraising, because it makes it easy for a Presbyterian who is typically afraid of asking for money. It makes it easy for us to ask for money, because when you read that book, it really connects and you start thinking to yourself, well, this isn't really asking for money, but it's so much more impactful than asking for money. It's inviting others into ministry, and it's the words that they share are they just roll off your tongue, and even the asker feels like I should be participating in this. It's the invitation. and it's the excitement about being a part of ministry. The asking is hard. It's a lot easier to do what that book recommends.
Thank
One
you.
other book I'd commend to you is Kitchen Table Giving, Reimagining How Congregations Connect with Their Donors by William Enright. So Bill Enright is a guru for Presbyterians, but also was the first director of Lake Institute at the Indiana University School of Philanthropy. And you can even follow Bill on Twitter, and you'll see different pieces about generosity that he tweets about regularly. But I commend this to you, Kitchen Table Giving by Bill Enright, and you can get this on Amazon or wherever you buy your book. You could go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it for you.
Thank you, Ellie. And thank you, Karl, again. I think on
Thank
that
you.
note, we're going to get ready to close this session.